this is Animation Review here, and welcome to another countdown. If you guys don't remember, a couple months ago, I made a video on the top 10 worst animated movies that I've ever seen. And the video was pretty bad. There were lots of problems with this video. Bad choices, bad editing, and I had way too many voice cracks in this video. Like, it's embarrassing. So, because that video was so bad, I decided I'm gonna do a redo of the top 10 worst animated movies of all time. Now, before we get started, I just want to mention some important rules with this video. Number 1, this list is my own personal opinion and you don't have to agree with me, but feel free to put your opinions in the comments below. Number 2, no live action animation hybrids. For example, no Smurfs or Smurfs 2. And lastly, number 3, any movie that I have not seen will not be mentioned on this list. Alright, now that we've got the rules out of the way, it's time to get to the countdown. My name is Animation Review, and today we'll be taking a look at the top 10 worst animated films of all time. Number 10. The Nut Job. For those of you who haven't seen this movie and watching the trailer, you're thinking, oh, this is just your average, generic animated kids movie. Well, unfortunately, you'd be wrong with that assumption, because this movie is not your average, generic animated kids movie. It's far worse than that. First off, the story doesn't even match to the original source. In the original source, titled Surly Squirrel, it was like a cops and robbers kind of thing. But in this movie, it's more of a heist than anything else. And yeah, sure, the animation is kinda decent, but the characters, oh my god. The characters are so obnoxious and hateful in this movie that it makes the movie have a mean-spirited tone, and no one likes a movie with a mean-spirited tone, especially me. The two worst characters of the movie include Grayson, who's just an annoying comic relief, and then there's Surly, who is by far one of the worst main characters in a movie that I've ever seen. And not only that, but the humor is pretty bad as well. The only things that they use to get quote-unquote good jokes is burping, farting, and a whole bunch of bad nut puns. Overall, The Nut Job is just a bad movie. It's mean-spirited, the characters are hateful, and the humor is pretty terrible. But when you compare it to the other movies that will be on this list, it's not all that bad. Number 9. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2. Now, before I say anything about the second movie, I want to give my opinions on the first movie. The first Cloudy film was kind of mediocre in my opinion. The story seems a little generic, the animation can get way too over the top sometimes, some of the characters are a little annoying, and overall, the movie's just kinda eh. But the second movie, well, in my opinion, I think is much worse than the first one. But let's see why. Well, first off, the story seems like the exact same thing as the first one. I mean, think about it. Flint has a problem with his invention, the Flintstophone, or however you say it. And then he goes on this big adventure with his friends to try to stop the machine. And like I said in the first movie, I thought the story was kind of generic. Because the story has many things taken from the first movie, it just makes the second movie's story both generic and unoriginal. Secondly, the animation. While some of the food designs are pretty cool, the animation can get way too over the top sometimes. Especially with Chester V, who's the villain of the movie. His movements are so unrealistic, it just looks weird. Also, the same annoying characters that were in the previous movie are also back, which isn't a good thing. The biggest problem with these characters is just some of them are extremely obnoxious, and with the over-the-top animation, it just makes the characters look even worse. Lastly, there's the humor. The sources of comedy that come in this movie come from the obnoxious and over-the-top animation, as well as the ridiculous amount of food puns. Some of the food puns are good, while some of them can be bad. And like I said before, the over-the-top animation just makes the movie look weird, and I forgot to mention this, but also bad. With an unoriginal and generic story, over-the-top and obnoxious animation, annoying characters, and unpleasant humor, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2 is not a good movie, and you shouldn't watch it, even if you're a fan of the first movie. Number 8. Planes. Now, around the time that the movie first came out, I liked this movie, but looking at it now as a critic, it's not as good. Planes is just a bad movie. Starting off with the story, it's the same old underdog story that we've heard many times before. The story is that the main character, Dusty Crophopper, wants to compete in the Wings Around the Globe rally to become a big star across the world. But like I said before, this is the same old underdog story that we've heard many times before, and probably those movies were better than this movie. This just makes the plot predictable, unoriginal, and generic. Not only that, but some of the characters behave in the exact same way as the characters from Cars. Like for example, the Mexican plane that hangs out with Dusty is the same thing as Mater. Now there are a few positives with this movie. I like the voice acting is pretty good, and the animation is decent. But even with those positives, this movie still isn't good. It just feels bland, unoriginal, and generic. You would be better off with the Cars movies. Number 7. Cargo. I came across this movie when watching the Saberspark video, and I decided to watch the movie myself, and man is it bad. I'll start off with the story. I mean, the story itself isn't that bad, it's just there's so many unnecessary scenes within the movie, and this just makes the movie kind of boring. Plus, the script isn't all that great either. There's some awkward silences within the movie, and that also makes it weird as well. But the biggest problem with the movie, as you can already tell from the clips, is the movie's animation. There are a lot of problems with the movie's animation, especially when comparing it to Cars. The animation on the Cars itself looks kinda awkward, the lip syncing is bad, and overall the animation just isn't good looking. The only positives that I could find in this movie was the voice acting. But other than that, everything else is so poorly executed. Cargo is just a mess of a movie. It's boring, the animation is bad, and there's just so many unnecessary parts. But then again, this whole movie was unnecessary. Number 6. The Emoji Movie. Pretty much everyone was expecting to see this movie on the list. This movie has gathered so much hate ever since the movie was announced, and when the movie actually came out, it was a lot worse than people expected. First off, the writing is just terrible. Not only is it a concept that people don't give a crap about, but the plot of the movie outright steals elements from Wreck-It Ralph, the Lego Movie, Inside Out, and even Sony's own Smurfs the Lost Village. Not only that, but the characters in this movie are just so bad. Because of the movie's message of about being yourself and don't be anything but yourself, this just makes all of the characters hate Gene, which gives the movie a mean-spirited tone. And like I said before with the nut job, I don't like movies with a mean-spirited tone. This just makes the characters both hateful and annoying. And what makes the characters even worse is the movie's humor. Most of the jokes that are in this movie are pretty bad. Well, other than this one emoticon joke that made me chuckle, every other joke falls flat on its face. Now, the animation isn't bad, like the animation itself isn't bad, but some of the character designs are lazy. Like all they did was just take an emoji and then stick some arms and legs. That's pretty lazy. Overall, the Emoji Movie is a train wreck. The story is unoriginal, the characters are hateful, and the humor is very bad. Just watch this movie for the credit and that's it. Number 5. Foodfight. Just like the Emoji Movie, this is another obvious choice for the list. This movie has been widely regarded as the worst animated movie of all time. But when you see number 4 through 1, Foodfight won't look as bad. But yes, Foodfight is a very bad movie. The writing is inconsistent, the animation looks disgusting and horrible, the characters are all unlikable, the humor is just a mess, and there are some weird sexual innuendos. Yeah, you heard me. But the reason why this movie isn't number 1 on the list is because, like I said before, number 4 through 1, in my opinion, are a lot worse than Foodfight. But the fact is that the filmmakers had to go through a lot of trouble to make this movie possible. Although it did end up as a very bad movie, the crew had to go through a lot of trouble. In 2002, while they were making the movie, apparently all the original files got stolen, and then in 2005 and 2006, it was going to be distributed by Lionsgate, and then it missed deadlines and all that. And then in 2011, another company got the rights to the movie and just finished it as quickly as possible, and that's why it's such a mess. And also, this movie is fun to watch just because of how bad it is. But nonetheless, Foodfight is still a very bad movie with inconsistent writing, disgusting animation, unlikable characters, terrible humor, and weird sex jokes. Like with the Emoji Movie, only watch this movie for the credit. Number 4. Chicken Little. Now this is definitely the worst movie that Disney has ever made. This movie is just abysmal. Starting off with the story is just ridiculous. The big thing of the story is that supposedly the sky is falling when the townsfolk aren't smart enough to look up at the sky and say, oh, the sky isn't falling. This makes all of the townsfolk mad at Chicken Little, and guess what? That means that there's a mean-spirited tone in this movie. Again, like I said before, I hate movies with a mean-spirited tone because that just makes them not fun to watch. And this movie isn't fun to watch. Not only that, but the animation is pretty bad as well. The textures look bad and the character designs just look ugly. Chicken Little is just a mess of a movie. The story is stupid, the characters are extremely hateful, and the animation is ugly. Personally, I recommend skipping this movie entirely. It is not a fun movie. Number 3. Joshua and the Promised Land. I came across this movie via a Saberspike video, and I totally regret making that decision. Man, this movie is bad. The biggest issue with the movie, as you can already tell, is that the animation is just god-awful. The textures are bad, the character animation is bad, the character designs are bad. Like, look at them, they're just naked. The animation is just so bad in this movie. But the movie was written, directed, and animated by one person. Although the result of the animation was very bad, this guy had to animate, write, and direct the entire movie. That is a lot of work for one person. He even did some voice acting as well. Which brings me to my next problem, the voice acting. It may not seem bad at first, but the audio quality of the voice acting isn't that good, so it's hard to understand what the people are trying to say. And I know that the story is from the Bible, but it was just poorly executed. The story is all over the place in this movie. In short, Leo the Lion is just a mess of a movie. It's got terrible animation, awkward voice acting, and a poorly executed story. I know I didn't talk much about this movie, but there's not really much to say about the movie. You already know it's bad just by looking at the quality of the animation. Regardless, Joshua and the Promised Land is still a very bad movie and you should never watch it. Number 2. Norm of the North. That's right guys, Norm of the North is no longer my number 1 worst animated movie. In my older top 10, I went on for ages about Norm of the North. I even told a story about how I came across this movie. I talked about the movie so much I basically did a review of Norm of the North. This time though, I'll try to keep it short since I've already talked about Norm of the North enough in my older video. So yes, I still think that this movie is very bad. The story doesn't make any sense, the animation is terrible, especially for the time that it was made, characters are unlikable or dumb, or in many cases both, and the humor is just terrible. There are only a few redeeming qualities with the movie. The only ones I can think of are the voice acting and the fact that it's funny to see how stupid some of the characters can be. But other than that, everything else about Norm of the North is just terrible. It is, without a doubt, the worst animated movie to be released in theaters. Don't watch this movie, it's bad. Well guys, we're almost at the number 1 spot, but before we get to that, I'd like to mention some quick, dishonorable mentions. Despicable Me 3. Out of all the Despicable Me movies, this one is easily the worst. Sure, the animation and the voice acting is very good, but the biggest problem with the movie is its story. There are way too many side plots to name, and it just causes the story to lose a lot of focus. And not only that, but some of the characters can be annoying, like Drew and the Minions. If you haven't seen the Despicable Me movies, sure, give it a try, but if not, this may not be for you. Minions. I know that this movie made a lot of money, but it's just annoying. I get it, the Minions are funny, but they're just so overused that they're starting to become annoying. Not only that, but other characters in the movie try to be funny, and they don't pull off good jokes. Plus, the movie focuses on the humor more than anything else. but the animation in this movie is pretty good. But even though this movie made a lot of money, Minions still isn't that great. Ice Age Collision Course. One of the hardest things to do for this list was to see if I wanted to put Collision Course on the list. But when comparing it to all the other movies I've mentioned, it's not all that bad. Sure, the story is all over the place with all the side plots, and some of the characters can be annoying with the amount of jokes that they try to put in the movie, but the animation is pretty good, especially when comparing it to all the other movies on the list. But other than that, the movie isn't that good. Hopefully this is the last Ice Age movie. And finally, Hoodwinked 2: Hood vs. Evil. Now, I have seen the first Hoodwinked movie, and in my opinion, it's pretty good, even though the animation ain't all that great. But the second movie is bad. Bad enough that it shouldn't have been released in theaters. This movie feels like a direct-to-DVD sequel. The story is just your basic, generic spy movie story. And the animation, well, yeah, it does look better than the first movie, but it doesn't look that great, especially when comparing it to all the other movies that were released at the time. Hoodwinked 2 is definitely one of the worst sequels of all time. It was a stupid idea to bring this movie to theaters, but yet again, this whole movie was a stupid idea. Well, those are my dishonorable mentions, and now it's time for the number one worst. And without a doubt, the number one worst animated movie is Leo the Lion. Now, when making this list, the hardest choice to make was to choose which one is worse, Leo the Lion or Norm of the North. I ended up choosing Leo the Lion over Norm of the North. Why? Well, because when I talked about Norm of the North, I mentioned it had a few redeeming qualities, like the voice acting, and the fact that it was funny to see how stupid the characters were. And when comparing Norm of the North to Leo the Lion, the animation of Norm of the North is much better. But the thing is, with Leo the Lion, there are no redeeming qualities in the movie whatsoever. There is nothing positive to say about this movie. So let's find out why Leo the Lion is the worst animated movie of all time. First off, the story doesn't make any sense. Apparently, there's this lion whose name is Leo, because obviously his name is in the title of the movie, who's a vegetarian. That is the stupidest story I think I've ever heard in a movie. And not only that, but the story has some unnecessary scenes as well. Secondly, the animation. Like I said before, in my opinion, Norm of the North's animation is much better than Leo the Lion's, and as you can tell, it is. Leo the Lion's animation is just terrible. Bad textures, bad character design, bad character animation, just bad everything in the animation. Then there's the editing. The editing in the movie is pretty bad. The slow motion effects that are in the movie are pretty bad, and some scenes would just drag on for too long. Lastly, there's the movie's dialogue. Not only are there moments in the movie where I can't understand what the characters are saying because either A, they're mumbling what they're saying, or B, the thing the character says can just be utterly confusing, but also, the dialogue makes some scenes feel super awkward. What more can be said? Leo the Lion is just a terrible movie. The story doesn't make any sense, the animation is terrible, the editing is terrible, the dialogue is terrible, everything about this movie is terrible! Like I said earlier, there is nothing positive about this movie, and if you do find something that's positive about this movie, please let me know. Nevertheless, Leo the Lion is an abysmal movie. This movie is so bad that it makes the Emoji Movie look like Toy Story, for crying out loud. Sometimes there are those kind of movies that are so bad that they're good, but Leo the Lion is a special kind of bad. It's the kind of bad where nothing good comes out of it. Please do me a big favor and never, ever watch this movie. Leo the Lion is, without a doubt, the worst animated movie that I have ever seen. Oh my god, it's over. It's all over. I don't ever want to see that movie again. Well guys, that was my redo of the top 10 worst animated movies of all time. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more from me, please do hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a video from me. Even though I'm saying it pretty late, we just hit 250 subscribers. I can't thank you guys enough for making me reach another milestone. Regardless, thank you guys for watching my video, and I'll see you all next time. Now if you'll excuse me, I need a nap.